Alright, welcome to chapter 4. I've opened up the sushi start file and I'm going to start working on page 57 in our book. So first thing I'm going to do is select our twist control and I'm going to open up our node editor. And then graph inputs and outputs just to see how this thing is connected. So we can see the twist control by way of what I believe is some sort of rotation, is connected to the end angle of this twist deformer. And so now we need to make this rotate the other way because the issue is our control rotates backwards, which is frustrating. So I'm going to set that back to 0 and go to my node editor. So in the node editor, I need to toggle the create panel on and off, which is just this one down here on the left. You'll remember this from the Hypershade probably, right? We can see all of these materials and utilities that we have used some of before, including our Arnold shader stuff. So a lot of this is for rendering, but we can also take advantage of some of this for our rigging purposes. So I'm going to go to the utilities section, so not Arnold's, but Maya's utilities sections. And then I'm going to find the multiply divide. Right, multiply divide. You could also just type multiply divide in here. I'm just going to drag out to the left and then I can close that. All right, so in this multiply divide, basically we just need to put this in between, right? So my twist control rotate Z is doing the twist end angle, and basically all we need to do to make it go the other way is to multiply it by -1. There we go. We can see how those are connected there. Cool. So the multiply divide, doesn't matter which one you choose as long as you connect it the right way. So I'm going to take this rotate Z and plug it to the multiply divide, and I'll do input 1x. It doesn't matter. You can choose any one of these three. Just make sure you choose the same letter for both of them. So I did input 1x, and then where did that go? Here we go. Unit version, multiply divide. My input 2x is going to be -1, right? So input 1x. Input 2x. If you did y, make sure you do y. If you did z, make sure you do z. Pretty easy, right? So I'm going to multiply divide, and then I'm going to plug that end result into the end angle here. So the output of my x is going to go to the end angle, right? So did you catch that? So the twist control rotate z is going to go into this unit conversion, which was automatically created when I plugged it to the multiply divide, right? So that input 1x, which is the rotate z, I'm going to multiply it by -1, and then that's going to go into this twist. So it's created a couple of these unit conversion nodes, which actually probably aren't needed, but it created them anyway, so that's fine. So all we're doing is rotating, multiplying by -1, and plugging it back in, and now this should work. Pretty simple. Okay, after you've read about the difference between one-to-one connections and constraints, we're going to jump to the utility and low-high resolution switch. I'm at the bottom of page 61 now. So this is chapter 4, Boy Polysmooth Start. So here we are. So what we're going to do is create a custom attribute that allows us to display several different resolutions of this mesh for different purposes. So what we're going to do is grab our geometry here, and we are just going to smooth it. Right, so mesh smooth. All right, so our geometry is smoothed. If we take a look and see what that actually did, we can find in our channel box this poly smooth face. And if we actually play with the divisions, if we set it to 0, it's back to where it was, right? One division will give us subdivided once. Two divisions, oops. Let me go back to that. Two divisions will go further, and 3 will go really, really high. All right, I'm going to set that back to 0. But notice that we can play around with that, and we can actually connect this attribute, this divisions attribute, to a custom attribute up here for our animator, or whoever's going to use this file later on. It's super important when we do this that we do not delete the history right now, because if I deleted the history on this mesh, we would no longer have access to this poly smooth face 1 input, right? So do not delete your history here. All right, on this node, this poly smooth face node, basically I'm going to grab everything except that divisions and lock them, because we're giving our animator or somebody else access to this this node, we want to make sure that we only give them access to the one thing that we want them to touch. Don't trust your animator. So I'm going to click on my head control here and open up the node editor. All right, so that gives me access to this head control node here in the node editor. I'm going to right click and hold, and I'm going to add an attribute. All right, so this gives me the add attribute window. So let's give it a name. First, I'm going to call this one low high. I'm going to make sure that this attribute is keyable, so you can actually create keyframes on this attribute. It's going to be a data type of integer, so 0, 1, 2, 3, as opposed to something like a float, which could have decimal places like these can. So an integer is just solid numbers. We can leave scalar here. My minimum value is going to be 0, and my maximum value is going to be 3. Let's go 4. This is definitely higher than I need, but it's nice to give somebody else access to a little bit more than we think is useful. And then the default will be 0, so that way when somebody opens this thing up, it'll be at 0, which is the way it currently looks right now, but they can play with it. All right, we're going to click on OK, and notice that this attribute has been created here, right? So we've created a custom attribute that can be used to change things. So we can go 0, we can go 1. If I say 10, the maximum will be 4. Right, 1, 2, 3, or 0 is our options here. All right. Now we need to connect it to do something useful. All right, so now I'm going to select the head control, right where that attribute is. I'm also going to select the geometry where that smooth divisions are, and I'm going to open up the node editor so I can start connecting these. All right, so remember on this head control, that's where that low high attribute is. Let's see on this geo. Let's see, this poly smooth face is actually what I'm looking for here. Let me grab these two and map my input and output connections. Here we go. So now I can find that poly smooth face that I'm looking for. Oops. So I want to connect my head control, right? Remember there's our low high, and our poly smooth face, there's my divisions. Those are what I want to connect. So I'm going to drag a connection from my head control, which will be low high, and I'm going to connect that to poly smooth face, which will be divisions. All right, so those two should be connected here. Let's test it. So when I grab my head control, I have access to low high, and if I change that to 1, we notice that our geometry gets smoothed. If I do 2, we go smoother, and 3, smoother. 4, crazy. If I do 5, it doesn't allow me. And let's do back to 0. Perfect. So we've created a custom attribute that we've connected to our poly smooth face here. All right, so what if we want to change this custom attribute? So instead of this 0, 1, 2, 3 that we type in, maybe Animator doesn't like that, we change that to actually a drop-down menu with different words. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to select our head control, go back to our node editor, and I am going to delete an attribute on this head control. So right-click and hold on the head control, delete attributes. And there's low high. Okay, we're going to create a new one. All right, so same thing as what we did before. I'm going to right click and hold on my head control, add an attribute, and I'm just also going to call this one low high just the way she does, spelled a little bit differently. This time the data type is going to be enum, which is short for enumerator, so we can actually put words in here. You can see we have some names. Green and blue are the default. So rather than values, we're going to use a drop-down menu of words, which is pretty cool. So we're going to click on the word green, and we'll change that to low. I'll click on the word blue, and we'll change that to medium. What if you wanted to do more than 2, however? Just click on the empty space below medium. It doesn't really tell you that, but that's it. So I'll change this one to high. And then click OK. So now we can see we have this low high attribute again, and we have low, medium, and high as a drop-down menu, which is nice. So I'm going to grab that head control and hit 3 just to drop this all the way down here. We can see we can connect that low high directly to that poly smooth face again. and divisions. All right, we'll test. So low is there, medium is there, and high is there. So how does this actually work? Basically, even though we're not connecting a direct number to that number of divisions, it counts the way computers count. So low is 0 in the divisions. You'll see that there. Medium will be 1 in divisions, and high will be 2 in divisions. So it just steps up 1 value each time. All right, there we are.